The city doesn't notice when you decide to change. There's no announcement, no countdown. Just mornings that start earlier than before, and nights that end without excuses. I leaned into that anonymity. It was easier to grow when no one was watching. Work became sharper. I took on projects others avoided, tight deadlines, high pressure, real stakes, the kind that either expose you or elevate you. I volunteered for presentations. I learned the language of influence, of negotiation, of staying calm when money and reputations were on the line. Results followed. Promotions don't always come with applause, but they come with leverage. Outside the office, I rebuilt my circle. Not many people. Just the right ones. A coworker who trained with me at dawn. A neighbor who understood silence better than advice. Old friends who didn't treat me like a tragedy. We shared meals that felt earned steak after a long week. Burgers after late workouts. Coffee that tasted better because it followed discipline. Flashback the wedding registry. Fancy plates we never opened. A blender still boxed in the closet. One night, I donated everything. Not out of spite. Out of clarity. Space matters. So does symbolism. My body continued to change, but more importantly, my posture did. I walked differently, slower, more deliberate. Confidence isn't loud. It's efficient. People noticed, but they didn't know why. They asked questions in indirect ways. I answered with work, not explanations. Opportunities followed momentum. A chance meeting at a charity event turned into a consulting offer. A side project became a second income stream. I learned to say no to distractions that didn't align with where I was headed. The city is full of temptationally nights. Fast wins, easy validation. I stopped chasing all of it. One afternoon, months later, ran into someone unexpected. Not her. Someone who had been at the wedding. He congratulated me, not awkwardly, not with pity. With respect, he said he'd been watching from a distance. Said the way I handled everything changed how people talked about me. Reputation travels quietly, but it travels. That night, I stood on my balcony overlooking the street. Taxis slid past. Music drifted up from somewhere below. I realized something then. My comeback wasn't a moment. It was a pattern. Consistency stacked on top of heartbreak until it became strength. Foreshadow. Success invites attention. Not all of it honest. Not all of it new. The message came late. A notification I didn't expect anymore. Her name. A different tone this time. Casual. Almost friendly. She had seen something online. An article. A photo. A mention tied to my work. She said she was glad I was doing well. I stared at the screen and felt nothing. No anger. No satisfaction. No urge to respond. Just confirmation. That's when it hit me. The comeback wasn't about proving her. It's wrong. It was about proving myself right. I didn't reply. Instead, I went to bed early. Alarm set for 5. Another day to build something that didn't depend on anyone else's approval. Weeks later, the city hosted a networking gala downtown. A Rise venue. Floor 2 ceiling windows. The kind of event people attend to be seen. I went for business. Nothing more. The room buzzed with conversation, glasses clinking, deals forming in corners. I moved through it calmly, greeting people, listening more than speaking. That's when I saw her across the room. She froze, not dramatically, just enough to be noticeable. She was dressed well, confident, surrounded by people. But when our eyes met, the balance shifted. I didn't approach. I didn't avoid. I simply continued the conversation I was already in. That choice mattered. Later, as I stepped outside onto the terrace, city lights stretching endlessly below, someone asked me how I stayed so focused after everything I'd been through. I smiled. Clarity, I said. Once you lose what you thought defined you, you get very clear about what actually does. Behind me, through the glass, I felt her presence without turning around. Some stories don't need revisiting. Some endings are strongest when they remain untouched. The city hummed beneath us, and for the first time since that unfinished wedding day, I felt something solid settle in my chest. Freedom. Asterisk. The city looks different when you stop needing it to validate you. Lights become lights. Noise becomes background. Faces blur into motion instead of judgment. That's the quiet power no one warns you about, the moment when your worth stops being negotiated. The gala ended late. I walked home instead of calling a car, letting the night air cool my thoughts. Streetlights stretched my shadow across the sidewalk. Somewhere nearby, a food truck sizzled, the smell of grilled beef and onions cutting through the concrete air. Normal life? Honest life? I thought back to the altar, not with pain anymore, but with precision. That version of me had been standing there waiting for permission to begin his life, waiting for a signal, waiting for someone else to choose him back. I finally understood the truth I couldn't see then. Love built on fear of loss is already unstable. Commitment without self-respect is a loan with no collateral. Weeks passed after the gala, then months, my calendar filled, not with distractions, but with intention. Meetings that mattered, projects that stretched me. Mornings that began before sunrise and ended with exhaustion, earned the right way. I started mentoring younger guys at work. Nothing dramatic, just quiet guidance. Teaching them how to carry themselves when pressure hits. How to listen more than they talk. How to lose without losing themselves. One afternoon, a mother visited the apartment. She paused in the doorway, taking it in. The cleaner lines. The absence of clutter. The feeling of peace that can't be staged. She hugged me longer than usual. "I worried about you," she admitted. "I know," I said, "but I don't anymore." That meant more than any promotion. Flashback, the night before the wedding. I had stood alone in this same apartment, rehearsing vows in my head. Promises about forever. About choosing each other every day. I smiled at the memory not because it hurt, but because it reminded me how sincere I had been. And sincerity, even when it's misplaced, is never wasted. It becomes experience. Then came the final turn. A mutual acquaintance reached out, asking if I'd be willing to speak on a panel about resilience and leadership. The topic made me pause, not because I was afraid, but because I finally understood the responsibility of visibility. When you survive something publicly, people project their own pain onto your recovery. I agreed anyway. The event was packed. Urban professionals. Young men searching for direction. Women listening closely. I spoke plainly. No hero story. No bitterness. Just truth. I talked about trust. About ignoring small warnings because you're invested in an outcome. About the danger of tying your identity to a single relationship. About how discipline saved me when motivation disappeared. About how real comebacks aren't loud, they're consistent. Applause followed, but it felt distant. Afterward, as people filtered out, I saw her again. This time she approached. No crowd. No audience. Just two people standing under fluorescent lights and shared history. She looked different than before, less certain. "More human? I heard you speak," she said. I nodded. She hesitated, then said it. The truth she had probably been carrying for months. Leaving was the worst decision I ever made. Not because I lost you, but because I lost myself after. I studied her face. The honesty was real this time. The regret, too. And here it was, the core moment. The ending people imagined differently. I didn't feel triumph. I felt clarity. "I hope you find what you're looking for," I said. And I meant it. She waited. Maybe for anger. Maybe for an invitation. Maybe for the man she left at the altar. He wasn't there. I was. She nodded slowly, understanding landing in her eyes. Then she walked away. No dramatic music. No final words. Just acceptance. I stepped outside into the night, city stretching endlessly in every direction. Cars moved. People laughed. Somewhere, someone was falling in love. Somewhere else, someone was losing it. Life kept circulating. Indifferent, but fair. That's when it fully hit me. She didn't leave me at the altar and ruin my life. She left me at the altar and returned my future. The comeback wasn't revenge. It wasn't. Success, it wasn't proving anything to anyone. It was becoming the kind of man who would never abandon himself again, and that was the real victory. By the third day, the city felt louder, not because it had changed, but because I had. Every sound pressed harder. Every face looked like it knew something I didn't. On my walk to work, I noticed things I'd ignored for years. The cracked glass on a bus stop ad, a woman crying quietly into her sleeve, two men arguing over a parking space like it was the last piece of land on earth. When trust starts to slip, awareness sharpens. That's how survival begins. She still hadn't come home. Her side of the closet stayed untouched, like a museum display of a life that might already be over. I told myself she was busy. I told myself relationships go through phases. I told myself not to jump to conclusions. Denial is loyalty's last defense. At work, my focus dissolved. Words blurred on the screen. Numbers lost meaning. During lunch, my coworker Brian sat across from me, chewing slowly, watching me like someone watches a storm from behind glass. "You look like you haven't slept," he said. "I'm fine." A lie, thin, weak. Brian had been around long enough to recognize silence before it spoke. "You know," he said carefully, "sometimes people leave before they leave." I looked up. "What's that supposed to mean?" He shrugged. "Just something I've seen." He didn't push. That made it worse. That afternoon, another message came from the same unknown number. "Check her stories. Not the one she wants you to see."
My chest tightened.
I hadn't checked her social media in days. I told myself I didn't need to. Trust doesn't require surveillance, or so I'd believed. But that night, alone in the apartment, I opened my phone. Her public profile was clean. Smiling photos. Neutral captions. Coffee cups. Office lighting. Safe lies. Then I remembered something she once said months ago. During an argument she'd dismissed as nothing. "You don't even know how to look," she'd said. "You only see what I let you." Found the private account. It wasn't hard. Secrets get sloppy when people feel confident. What I saw didn't destroy me right away. It dismantled me. Slowly, photos from places she claimed she hated. Restaurants she said were too expensive. Rooftop bars. Dimly lit lounges. A man's arm cropped carefully out of one picture. Another photo where her smile looked different, lighter, freer. It's unburdened. She wasn't hiding happiness. She was hiding me. The timestamps told a story my heart didn't want to read. Late nights. Early mornings. Days she said she was working late. I sat on the edge of the bed, phone shaking slightly in my hand. This wasn't a mistake. This was intention. A flashback surfaced. Sharp and cruel. Her standing in the kitchen months ago, arms crossed, voice cold. "You're too focused on building something. You forget to live." I had answered, "I'm building for us." She hadn't replied. Now I understood why. The next morning, I didn't confront her. I didn't rage. I didn't beg. I watched. I listened. I learned. I noticed how mutual friends avoided eye contact when her name came up. How conversations stopped when I entered a room. How silence spread like oil. That's when I met Leon. He worked 2 floors below me. Tall, quiet, always alone during breaks. He sat beside me in the cafeteria without asking. "She thinks you're blind," he said, staring at his tray. I froze. "What?" Leon finally looked at me. His eyes weren't cruel. They were tired. "She's been telling people you're unstable, that you can't handle pressure, that she's afraid of you." My stomach dropped. "That's not true." "I know," he said, "but truth isn't always the loudest." Story, he slid his phone across the table. On. The screen was a photo I'd never seen. Her, laughing, holding. Hands with someone whose face wasn't hidden. The timestamp, burned. She told everyone you'd fall apart. When she left, Leon continued, She said breaking you was necessary. Necessary. That word echoed like a verdict. I pushed the phone back to him slowly. Why tell me this? Leon hesitated. Because someone did the same thing to me once. And I stayed silent. Silence helps the wrong person win. That night alone again, I stood on the balcony. City lights blinking below like signals I'd missed. She wasn't just leaving. She was rewriting me into someone weak, dangerous, disposable. She thought she could break me emotionally, socially, completely, and for the first time. Instead of fear, I felt something else rising. Clarity. The storm wasn't coming. It had already started. Asterisk. I didn't sleep that night, not because my mind wouldn't slow down, but because it finally did clarity. Cold, focused, unforgiving by morning. I stopped asking why and started asking how. How long had this been planned? How many conversations had happened without me? How many versions of me had been told to people who once shook my hand and called me brother? I dressed carefully. Neutral colors. A calm face. The kind of appearance that gives nothing away. In the mirror, I practiced a look that said unbothered. Not proud of it, but necessary. At work, the atmosphere had shifted. It wasn't hostile. It was worse. Polite distance. Controlled smiles. Whispers that died when I passed. She was shaping a narrative, and it was spreading faster than truth ever does. I spent lunch alone, eating a turkey sandwich I couldn't taste, listening to two coworkers talk about real estate prices and weekend plans like nothing in the world was burning. That's when Renee sat across from me. Renee had been there longer than almost anyone. Sharp eyes, sharp mind. The kind of woman people underestimated until it was too late. You're being set up, she said without greeting. I didn't flinch. For what? I asked. She lowered her voice. For being unstable, difficult. A liability. There was again. Liability. She's been asking questions, Renee continued. About company policy, about documentation, about how complaints work. My fingers tightened around the paper cup. Complaints about who? Renee met my eyes. You, the city outside the window blurred. I thanked her, walked away, locked myself in a bathroom stall, and breathed till my heartbeat slowed. This wasn't just betrayal. This was a campaign. That evening, I didn't go home right away. I walked. Blocks and blocks. Past food carts selling burgers and hot dogs. Past bars filling up with laughter. Past couples arguing quietly like they still believed repair was possible. I ended up in a small diner near the train tracks. Vinyl seats. Coffee that tasted burned. A place that didn't care who you were as long as you paid. I ordered meatloaf and mashed potatoes. Comfort food. Food that reminded me of stability. As I ate, another flashback hit. Her voice soft but sharp. If things go bad, don't make this ugly. At the time, I thought she meant arguments. Now I knew she meant me. My phone vibrated. Unknown. Number again, she's collecting statements. You should do the same. This time I replied. Who are you? The response came quickly. Someone who doesn't want to watch you disappear. I stared at the screen, then typed, what do I do? 3 dots appeared. Disappeared. Appeared again. You stop reacting. You start documenting. Dates, messages, witnesses, everything. That night I opened a folder on my laptop and titled it with today's date. I didn't call it evidence. I called it memory. I saved screenshots, messages, timestamps. I wrote down conversations as accurately as I could remember them. I included names, places, times, not for revenge, for survival. Over the next few days, I became invisible by design. I spoke less, observed more. People reveal themselves when they think you're defeated. She finally came home on the 5th night. She walked in like nothing had happened. Calm, composed, carrying takeout bags that smelled like fried chicken and Biscuits. Hey, she said lightly. I looked at her like she was a stranger renting space in my life. You okay? She asked, placing the food on the counter. I nodded. Long week. She smiled. Relief flashed across her face. Quick, greedy. I'm exhausted, she said. Work's been crazy. I watched her hands. Steady. No guilt. We ate in silence. She talked about her day. I listened, like an archivist. Before bed, she reached for me. I stepped back. I'm tired, I said. She studied my face, searching for cracks. Don't shut me out, she warned softly. There it was. The threat wrapped in concern. That night, lying beside someone who had already left me in every way that mattered, I understood something important. Breaking someone doesn't happen in one moment. It happens through patience, planning, and pretending. She thought she was winning. She didn't know the game had changed. Pressure changes people. Some crack under it, some adapt, some become something sharper. By the second week, tension stopped hiding. It walked openly through hallways, sat in meetings, and waited for me to react. That was the trap. Reaction would make her story believable. So I didn't react. I showed up early. Left on time? Did my work clean and precise? No arguments. No explanations. No emotional leaks. That unsettled her. At home, she watched me like someone studies a locked door. She asked careful questions. Offered sudden kindness. Cooked meals she knew I liked: grilled chicken, corn on the cob, apple pie from the bakery down the street. Love, when weaponized, feels rehearsed. One night, while she slept, her phone lit up on the dresser. I hadn't planned to look. I didn't want to become that person. But survival doesn't care about pride. The message preview was enough. He's still calm. I expected more damage. I didn't open it. I didn't touch the phone. I didn't need to. That single sentence confirmed everything. The next day, the meeting happened. Human resources. Neutral room. Neutral faces. Neutral language that carried real consequences. She sat across from me, hands folded, eyes glassy, a performance polished to perfection. They asked questions. She spoke gently, carefully, about stress, about fear, about how I had changed, about how she didn't feel safe emotionally. No shouting, no accusations, just concern. Concern is dangerous. It sounds reasonable. When it was my turn, I spoke slowly. I understand why this looks convincing, I said. That's why I documented everything. The room shifted. I placed printed pages on the table. Dates, messages, screenshots, witness names. A timeline that told a different story, one of planning, manipulation, and quiet control. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't insult her. I let the facts breathe. Her eyes widened just slightly. The first real crack. The meeting ended without conclusions. Investigations take time. Truth takes longer. Outside, she cornered me near the elevators. You think you've won? She whispered, anger finally leaking through. I think I survived, I replied. Asterisk that night. She didn't come home. Instead, my phone rang. Leon, she's panicking, he said. She didn't expect resistance. Neither did I admitted. That was the moment I understood something crucial. She never wanted me gone. She wanted me broken. Broken people don't defend themselves. Broken people don't expose lies. Broken people disappear quietly. I refused. Days later, the unknown number called me for the first time. A woman's voice. Calm. Professional. My name is Naomi, she said. I used to be where you are now. How she'd been pushed out years earlier. How the same patterns repeated. How silence protected the wrong people. You don't win by destroying her, Naomi said. You win by becoming undeniable. That became my focus. I stopped trying to clear my name to everyone. I focused on building something that didn't require approval. The contract I'd been chasing, it came through, quietly, cleanly. My work spoke where my voice didn't need to. At home, when she finally returned, the apartment felt smaller, temporary. She stood in the doorway, eyes red, mask slipping. "You've changed," she said. "Yes," I agreed. That was the point. She laughed bitterly. "You think this makes you strong?" I met her stare without flinching. "No," I said. "I think what you tried to do made me free." That night, I packed a bag, not in anger, in clarity. I walked out without slamming the door behind me. A plan unraveled. Ahead of me, something unfamiliar, waited peace. But the real reckoning, the moment she realized she hadn't broken me, it all was still. Coming * leaving didn't feel dramatic. No. Shouting, no tears, no audience, just the soft click of the door closing behind me and the weight of something heavy lifting off my chest. I moved into a short-term rental across towns, small place, clean walls, quiet nights. A reset button, disguised as square footage. For the first time in months. I slept through the night. The city looked different when I woke up alone. Not kinder. Just honest. The noise felt distant, manageable. I made breakfast, eggs, toast, black coffee, and ate without rushing, without explaining myself to anyone. Peace isn't loud when it arrives. It's careful at work. The investigation continued. HR called people in one by one. Questions spread. Patterns emerged. Stories stopped lining up the way she wanted them to. That's when the tone shifted. People who had avoided me started asking neutral questions, then thoughtful ones, then apologetic ones. I didn't know what to believe. It became a common phrase. It always does, after the damage is done. One afternoon, Renee stopped by my desk. "She's losing control of the narrative," she said quietly, "and she knows it." I nodded. "What happens now?" Renee leaned in. "Now, she reacts. Reaction is where mistakes live." That evening, my phone lit up again. Not the unknown number this time. Her name? I let it ring. She texted instead. "We need to talk." I waited an hour before replying. "About what?" Seconds passed. "You're making me look bad." There it was. Not us. Not truth. Not closure. Image. I met her the next day in a public cafe downtown. Bright lights. Cameras. Witnesses. I chose the place carefully. So did she. She arrived late, eyes sharp, posture tense. No tears this time. No softness. "You blindsided me," she said without greeting. "I documented reality," I replied. "That's not an ambush." She leaned forward. "You think people believe you?" "I think facts age better than performances." Her jaw tightened. "You were supposed to fall apart," she said, then stopped herself. "Too late." I raised an eyebrow. "Supposed to?" Silence stretched between us, thick and revealing. She laughed once, bitter. "You don't get it. I did what I had to do." "For who?" I asked. "For me," she snapped. "You were holding me back." The truth finally stood up without makeup. I paid for my coffee and stood. "This conversation is over," I said. "So is whatever story you were trying to write about me." As I walked out, she called after me. "You think this makes you a hero?" I turned. "No," I said. "It makes me honest." The fallout didn't explode. It eroded. Her allies grew quiet. Invitations stopped. Doors closed softly but firmly. Not out of punishment, but caution. People fear patterns once they see them. A week later, HR concluded their review. No wrongdoing on my part. Multiple inconsistencies on hers. Professional language. Serious consequences. She resigned before anything formal could land. Control slipping feels like betrayal to those who rely on it. Naomi called that night. "You handled it right," she said. "You let the truth breathe." "What happens to her?" I asked. Naomi paused. "The same thing that happens to anyone who mistakes manipulation for power. Eventually, they face themselves." I hung up and sat by the window. watching traffic flow like nothing monumental had happened, but something had. I wasn't angry anymore. Anger ties you to the person who hurt you. Freedom doesn't. Weeks passed. My work flourished. The contract expanded. New doors opened without me forcing them. People responded to consistency. 2, calm. 2, boundaries. One evening, as I walked home with takeout fried chicken, coleslaw, a slice of pie, felt it fully for the first time. She hadn't broken me. She had removed the last illusion keeping me stuck and somewhere in the city. She was realizing that breaking someone isn't the same as erasing them. Sometimes, it teaches them exactly who they are without you. Time didn't heal me. That's a lie people tell because it sounds comforting. What healed me was distance. What healed me was truth. What healed me was finally standing still long enough to hear my own thoughts again. Weeks turned into months. The city kept moving, indifferent to my private transformation. New buildings rose. Old ones cracked. People fell in and out of love on the same sidewalks where I had once questioned my worth. I stopped checking my phone out of habit. Stopped waiting for messages that would never come. Stopped rehearsing conversations in my head that no longer mattered. Freedom feels boring at first, then it feels expensive. One evening, ran into Brian outside a bar near the office. He looked surprised, then relieved. "You look solid," he said. "I feel clear," I replied. We sat at a high table inside, the noise around us low and harmless. He ordered wings. I stuck to water. Discipline had become my quiet anchor. "I owe you an apology," Brian said. I believed parts of her story. "I know," I said, and I meant it. He hesitated. "Why didn't you fight harder at first?" I thought about it. "Because fighting noise with noise just creates more noise," I said. I needed space to hear myself. That answer surprised even me. Later that night, walking home under streetlights that hummed like tired witnesses, a memory rose one I hadn't replayed in a while. Her standing by the window. Arms crossed, voice low. "If I ever leave, you won't survive it." I smiled to myself. Not out of spite, out of understanding. She had confused access with ownership, control with strength, my silence with weakness. In the months that followed, I rebuilt in ways no one applauded. Morning routines, clean finances, stronger boundaries. I reconnected with people I had neglected. Let go of people who thrived on chaos. I learned to enjoy my own company again. Cooked real meals. Took walks without headphones. Let thoughts finish instead of drowning them out. One afternoon, Renee invited me for lunch. "They're using your case as a reference now," she said between bites of her burger. Training, awareness. I nodded. If it helps someone else, it was worth it. She studied me. "You're not bitter," I said. "I'm educated." That was the truth. Didn't need revenge. I didn't need an apology. I needed my name back. And I had it. The city gave me a moment of quiet validation when I least expected it. I was exiting a building downtown when I saw her across the street. She looked different. Smaller somehow. Less certain. She didn't see me at first. When she did, she froze. For a second, the world narrowed. She crossed halfway, then stopped. Fear flickered across her face. Not fear of me, but fear of what she couldn't control anymore. I didn't wave, didn't smile, didn't turn away. I simply stood, grounded, whole. Untouched, that was enough. She looked down and walked in the opposite direction. I felt no triumph, just closure that night, alone in my apartment. I poured a glass of soda, sat by the window, and reflected on something Naomi had once said. You win by becoming undeniable. Understood it fully now. Undeniable doesn't mean loud. It means consistent, unshakable, rooted. In truth, what survived the fire? Wasn't anger or pride, it was self-respect. And that was something no one could ever take from me again, asterisk. The city teaches you something if you pay attention long enough. It teaches you that buildings fall. Names fade and stories change hands, but character stays. Character survives pressure. Character outlives rumors. Character doesn't need witnesses. I learned that on an ordinary morning. Months after everything ended, I was walking to work, coffee in hand, when my phone buzzed. An unfamiliar number. I almost ignored it. Old habits die slowly. The message was short. I owe you the truth. I stopped walking. For a moment, the street noise fell away. Cars passed. People brushed by. Life continued without waiting for my response. I didn't feel fear. I didn't feel anger. I felt distance, I replied anyway. Say it. The reply came slower this time. I thought if I broke you first, you wouldn't see who I really was. There it was. Not an apology. A confession, she went on. I needed you small so I could feel big. I needed you doubting yourself so I didn't have to face my own emptiness. When you didn't collapse, I panicked. I read the words once. Then again, the city noise returned. For years. I'd imagined this moment differently. Louder. More dramatic. Vindicating. Instead, it felt like setting down a weight I hadn't realized I was still carrying. I typed one last response. I see you, but I'm done carrying what was never mine. I blocked the number. Closure doesn't always come with agreement. Sometimes it comes with refusal. That evening, I cooked dinner real food, slow and intentional. Grilled steak, potatoes, something simple earned. I ate at the table, not the couch. Small habits that reminded me I was present in my own life again. Later, as the city dimmed outside my window, I thought about the version of myself from the beginning of this story, the man on the balcony with cold coffee. The man who trusted without boundaries. The man who thought. Endurance was love. I didn't judge him. He did the best he could with what he knew. Growth isn't about erasing who you were, it's about honoring who you were. People often ask how to spot betrayal early. The truth is uncomfortable. You don't always spot it, you survive. It dared you survive it by choosing truth over comfort, by choosing silence over spectacle, by choosing self-respect over approval. She thought she could break me because she mistook access for control, because she believed kindness meant weakness, because she thought love meant ownership. She was wrong. What she touched wasn't fragile. It was unfinished. And pressure doesn't destroy what's unfinished, it reveals. It thought the city outside my window kept moving, unaware of the quiet victory taking place inside me. Somewhere, people were still lying. Somewhere, someone was still being underestimated. But not me. Not anymore. I turned off the lights and went to bed, not haunted by the past. Not chasing the future, but grounded in the present. Whole, unbroken, and finally free.